American Graffiti, 1973. One film, one night. 8 young actors who had no idea what was coming. Same California streets. Same cruising strip. Same summer night frozen on celluloid. Completely different lives the moment George Lucas called cut. One became the most powerful director in Hollywood and never looked back. One won an Oscar at 29 and then watched his life collapse in slow motion. One was just 12 years old on that set, and the stories she carried off it would shake the entire entertainment world decades later. One had a cowboy hat and 3 scenes and became the biggest movie star on Earth. 8 cast members, 1 dead, and the secrets they kept would fill more than one film. Where are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments below, and if you have not subscribed yet, hit that button now. This story starts in 1973, and it does not stop. Number 1 on the list is Richard Dreyfuss, who played Kurt Henderson, the restless, overthinking graduate, spending one last night in town trying to decide if he was brave enough to leave everything behind. He was 23 years old when they filmed it, and he had no idea that one role in a low-budget George Lucas picture would be the door that opened everything. What most people never knew was that Richard Stephen Dreyfuss was born on October 29, 1947, in Brooklyn, New York, and raised in Bayside, Queens, before his family relocated to Beverly Hills, California, when he was a teenager. His father was a restaurateur and lawyer. His mother was a peace activist. He grew up in a household where opinions were loud, arguments were encouraged, and nobody sat quietly when they had something to say. That energy followed him onto every set he ever walked onto. He found acting early. He studied at the Beverly Hills High School Drama Department and later at San Fernando Valley State College, before dropping out to pursue the craft full-time. Before American Graffiti, he had already appeared in The Graduate in 1967 in an uncredited role and had done television work on shows including Bewitched and Room 222. He was building. He was patient. He was hungry. American Graffiti changed everything overnight. George Lucas cast him because Dreyfuss had a quality that was almost impossible to manufacture. You believed every single thought happening behind his eyes. Kurt Henderson was supposed to be a young man paralyzed between the familiar and the unknown, and Dreyfuss played that paralysis so honestly that audiences felt it in their chest. Then came Jaws in 1975. Steven Spielberg cast him as marine biologist Matt Hooper, and the film became the first movie in history to gross over $100 million at the domestic box office. Then came Close Encounters of the Third Kind in 1977, again with Spielberg. Then came The Goodbye Girl, also in 1977, opposite Marsha Mason, and that performance won him the Academy Award for Best Actor. He was 29 years old, making him the youngest Best Actor winner in Oscar history at that time. 29 years old, an Oscar on the shelf. The world completely open in front of him. And then things got complicated. Through the late 1970s and into the 1980s, Dreyfuss battled a serious drug and alcohol addiction that he has spoken about with remarkable honesty in interviews over the years. In 1982, he was involved in a car accident in Los Angeles while under the influence of drugs. His car struck a tree on Sunset Boulevard. He was cited. The headlines were brutal. He has since described that period as the lowest point of his life, and the moment he finally understood he needed help. He rebuilt. Slowly and completely. He returned to form with Down and Out in Beverly Hills in 1986 and Tin Men in 1987, both directed by Paul Mazursky. He received an Academy Award nomination for Mr. Holland's Opus in 1995, playing a musician who spends his entire career teaching and never quite becomes what he dreamed of becoming. That performance hit differently for people who knew his story. He has been married 3 times, to Jeremy Rain from 1983 to 1995, with whom he had 3 children, Benjamin, Emily, and Harry. Then to Janelle Lacey from 1999 to 2005. Then to Svetlana Erokin from 2006 to 2008. In 2017, his son publicly accused him of past inappropriate behavior. In 2023, during the wave of industry reckoning, multiple women came forward with allegations of misconduct dating back decades. Dreyfuss has pushed back on several of those accounts publicly. The legal and public conversations around those allegations are ongoing. He is 77 years old as of 2025, still working, still talking, still impossible to ignore when he walks into a room or onto a screen. The boy from Brooklyn who could not decide whether to stay or go, he went. And the road he took was nothing like anyone expected. Number 2 on the list is Ron Howard, who played Steve Bolander, the popular responsible boyfriend, trying to hold his relationship together while the entire world he grew up in was about to change forever. He was 18 years old when they filmed it. 18, and he was already a veteran. What most people never knew was that Ronald William Howard was born on March 1, 1954, in Duncan, Oklahoma, into a family where performing was not a dream, it was simply what everyone did. His father, Rance Howard, was an actor and director. His mother, Jean Spiegel Howard, was an actress. He made his film debut at 18 months old in a movie his father was working on. By the time he was 6, he was playing Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show, one of the most beloved children in the history of American television. And he held that role for 8 full seasons from 1960 to 1968. He was not new to cameras. He was not nervous on set. He had been doing this his entire life. George Lucas specifically sought him out for American Graffiti because Howard reminded Lucas of himself as a teenager, the responsible one, the good student, the kid who did everything right and still felt the ground shifting under his feet. Steve Bolander was that character completely, and Howard played him with a quiet emotional accuracy that felt less like acting and more like memory. After American Graffiti, he landed the role that would make him one of the most recognizable faces in America. From 1974 to 1980, he played Richie Cunningham on Happy Days, the ABC sitcom that ran for 11 seasons and became a cultural institution. He was in living rooms across the country every single week. But even while Happy Days was at its peak, Howard was already planning his exit. He directed his first feature film Grand Theft Auto in 1977, while still appearing on Happy Days every week. He was 23 years old. He directed it for Roger Corman, on a budget so small, most people would not believe the number. But it worked, and Howard never stopped directing after that. He followed with Night Shift in 1982, then Splash in 1984, which became a massive box office hit, then Cocoon in 1985, then the adventure film Willow in 1988, then Backdraft in 1991, then the legal thriller The Paper in 1994, then Apollo 13 in 1995, starring Tom Hanks, which earned 9 Academy Award nominations and is still considered one of the finest films about the American space program ever made. Then Ransom in 1996, then the film that put him in a completely different category, A Beautiful Mind in 2001, starring Russell Crowe as mathematician John Nash, earned him the Academy Award for Best Director, and the film won Best Picture. The boy who played Opie on black and white television had become one of the most decorated filmmakers in Hollywood history. He did not stop there. The Da Vinci Code in 2006, Frost Nixon in 2008, which earned 5 Oscar nominations, Rush in 2013, Inferno in 2016, and in 2018, when the Star Wars universe needed someone to step in and save the production of Solo: A Star Wars Story. After the original directors were fired mid-shoot, it was Ron Howard they called. He delivered the film on time. His personal life has been as steady as his professional one. He met Cheryl Alley when they were both teenagers and married her on June 7, 1975. They have been married for over 50 years. They have 4 children together, daughters Bryce Dallas Howard, who became a successful actress and director in her own right, Jocelyn Howard, and twins Paige and Reed Howard. Bryce Dallas Howard directed episodes of The Mandalorian and became one of the most talked-about filmmakers of her generation. The apple did not fall far. Ron Howard is 71 years old, as of 2025. Still directing, still producing, still one of the most trusted names in the entire film industry. The teenager who spent one night cruising the streets of a fictional California town built a career so large it is almost impossible to hold in a single thought. Number 3 on the list is Paul Le Mat, who played John Milner, the local drag racing legend, in the Yellow Deuce Coupe, who was faster than everyone on the strip and somehow still the loneliest person in the film. He was 26 years old when they filmed it. 26, playing a teenager and pulling it off completely, because there was something about Paul Le Mat that never quite looked like he belonged to any particular decade. He just looked like John Milner, like the guy who peaked in high school and knew it and kept showing up to the strip anyway, because the alternative was admitting the world had moved on without him. What most people never knew was that Paul Le Mat was born on September 22, 1945, in Rahway, New Jersey, and grew up in a working-class household where nobody was handed anything. He served in the United States Army before pursuing acting, which gave him a groundedness that most young performers in Hollywood simply did not have. He was not a drama school kid. He was not a product of the studio system. He came to acting the hard way, and it showed in every single thing he did on screen. Before American Graffiti, his credits were thin. He had done small television appearances and was still largely unknown when George Lucas cast him. That casting decision turned out to be one of the finest of the entire production. Le Mat took John Milner and made him iconic. The cowboy hat, the slow lean against the car, the way he looked at Carol sitting in his passenger seat like she was the most inconvenient thing that had ever happened to him, and then slowly started to actually care. That arc from annoyed to protective to genuinely tender was entirely in Le Mat's hands, and he carried it perfectly. The film made him a name, and Hollywood came looking. He appeared in the sequel More American Graffiti in 1979, reprising John Milner in a story that jumped forward in time and showed what became of everyone after that one long night. Then came the role that should have made him a permanent fixture at the top of the industry. In Melvin and Howard in 1980, directed by Jonathan Demme, he played Melvin Dummer, the gas station attendant, who claimed he gave Howard Hughes a ride and was left a fortune in Hughes's will. The performance was extraordinary. The film won 2 Academy Awards, and Le Mat received a Golden Globe nomination for his work. Critics were unanimous. This was a major talent operating at the highest level. What happened next is the quieter part of the story. The roles that should have followed did not arrive the way anyone expected. He worked consistently through the 1980s, appearing in Death Valley in 1982, and then moving into genre films including Puppet Master in 1989 and Puppet Master 2 in 1990, which found him a cult following, but not the mainstream career his early work had promised. He appeared in Grave Secrets in 1989 and continued picking up film and television work through the decade without ever quite landing the role that would bring him back to the conversation at the level Melvin and Howard had suggested was possible. Through it all, he remained one of the most private figures in the entire American Graffiti cast. No celebrity profiles, no talk show circuit, no memoir. Paul Le Mat simply lived his life away from the machinery of Hollywood fame with a completeness that most actors in his position never quite manage. His personal life has remained almost entirely out of the public record by his own clear intention. No confirmed marriages are documented in public sources. No public statements about his private world. Just the work and then the quiet. He is 79 years old as of 2025. And somewhere out there, the man who made John Milner one of the coolest characters in American cinema history is still living exactly the way he always seemed to want to. On his own terms, with nobody watching too closely. Number 4 on the list is Charles Martin Smith, who played Terry the Toad Fields, the awkward, lovable underdog, who borrowed a car he could barely drive, spent the entire night trying to impress a girl completely out of his league, and somehow made the whole thing work through sheer desperate charm. He was 18 years old when they filmed it, and he was playing himself in the best possible way, the kid nobody sees coming, who turns out to be the most interesting person in the room once you actually pay attention. What most people never knew was that Charles Martin Smith was born on October 30th, 1953, in Van Nuys, California, which put him right in the middle of the same Southern California culture that American Graffiti was trying to capture. He did not have to reach far to find Terry the Toad. The awkwardness was real. The hunger to be seen was real. And the comedy that came out of that combination was so honest. It never felt like a performance. It felt like a confession. He studied at California State University Fullerton before Hollywood pulled him in a direction that made finishing his degree feel less urgent. Before American Graffiti, he had appeared in a small role in Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid in 1973. The Sam Peckinpah Western released the same year as Graffiti, which told you something about how quickly he was moving through the industry, even as a teenager. American Graffiti gave him his real introduction to audiences, and they responded immediately. Terry the Toad became one of the most quoted and remembered characters in the film because Smith played him with a physical specificity that went far beyond the script. Every nervous glance, every botched attempt at coolness, every moment where Terry almost pulled it off before spectacularly failing, all of that was Charles Martin Smith, working at a level that most 18-year-olds simply cannot reach. After the film, he continued acting and continued growing. He appeared in Rafferty and the Gold Dust Twins in 1975, and then landed a role in the Buddy Holly Story in 1978, playing Holly's drummer Jerry Allison, in a performance that required him to actually learn to play the drums convincingly. He learned. He played every note himself on screen. The film earned him serious critical attention and reminded anyone who had forgotten that the kid from American Graffiti had real range. Then came Never Cry Wolf in 1983, directed by Carol Ballard for Walt Disney Productions, in which Smith played a government biologist sent alone into the Canadian wilderness to study wolf behavior. The film was almost entirely a solo performance. Weeks of screen time with no co-stars, no dialogue partners, just Smith and the landscape and the wolves. It is considered one of the finest and most underrated American films of the 1980s, and Smith's work in it was nothing short of remarkable. And then he did something that genuinely surprised everyone who had been watching his acting career develop. He moved behind the camera. He directed his first feature, Trick or Treat, in 1986, a horror film that found a cult audience and proved he understood how to build atmosphere and tension from the director's chair. He followed with the family film Air Bud in 1997, about a dog who can play basketball, which became a genuine cultural phenomenon, spawning multiple sequels and a franchise that is still generating content today. He directed The Snow Walker in 2003, a Canadian survival film that won multiple Genie Awards, Canada's equivalent of the Oscars. Then Dolphin Tale in 2011, starring Harry Connick Jr. and Ashley Judd, based on the true story of a dolphin named Winter, who lost her tail and was fitted with a prosthetic. The film earned $95 million worldwide on a modest budget and was followed by a sequel, Dolphin Tale 2, in 2014, which Smith also directed. He married Janet Smith and has maintained one of the quietest and most stable personal lives of anyone in the American Graffiti cast. No scandals, no public collapses. Just a man who showed up, did the work, and kept reinventing what the work looked like. Charles Martin Smith is 71 years old as of 2025. The kid everybody underestimated on that cruising strip turned out to be one of the most versatile and quietly accomplished careers in the entire cast. Terry the Toad would have loved that. Number 5 on the list is Cindy Williams, who played Laurie Henderson, the emotional heart of the entire film. Kurt's sister Steve's girlfriend, and the one person on that long California night who had the most to lose depending on which way the morning went. She was 24 years old when they filmed it, and she brought something to Laurie that the script alone could not have delivered, a warmth that felt completely unguarded and a stubbornness that felt completely earned. What most people never knew was that Cindy Williams was born on August 22, 1947, in Van Nuys, California, the same city that produced Charles Martin Smith, which meant two of the most important emotional performances in American Graffiti came from the same small corner of the San Fernando Valley. Her father was an electronics technician. Her mother worked in a cafeteria. She grew up in a household that had very little money and a great deal of love, and she carried both of those things into every role she ever played. She studied acting at Birmingham High School in Van Nuys, and then at Los Angeles City College, where she was part of the theater program, before dropping out to pursue professional work. Her early television credits included appearances on Room 222 and The Odd Couple, and she was building steadily when George Lucas came looking for someone to play Laurie. The casting was perfect from the first reading. After American Graffiti, the industry took notice immediately. Francis Ford Coppola cast her in The Conversation in 1974, one of the most critically acclaimed films of that entire decade, starring Gene Hackman and a young Harrison Ford. Yes, the same Harrison Ford who had played Bob Falfa in Graffiti just 1 year earlier. Being in that film placed Cindy Williams at the absolute center of the most exciting filmmaking happening in America at that moment. And then came the role that would define the next decade of her life. In 1976, she was cast as Shirley Feeney in Laverne and Shirley, the ABC spin-off from Happy Days, that paired her with Penny Marshall as the two title characters working on a Milwaukee bottling assembly line in the 1950s. The show debuted in January 1976 and immediately became the #1 rated show in America. Not one of the top shows. The #1 show in the entire country. It held that position for 2 full seasons. Cindy Williams was one of the most watched people on American television, and Shirley Feeney became one of the most beloved sitcom characters of her generation. Optimistic, principled, romantic, and completely certain that everything was going to work out, even when all available evidence suggested otherwise. The show ran for 8 seasons through 1983, but Williams departed before the final season, following a legal dispute with the producers over her pregnancy and working conditions after she married musician Kenny Lubka in 1982. She sued. The case was settled. But her exit from the show she had helped build into a television institution left a wound that never fully healed publicly. She and Kenny Lubke had 2 children together, a daughter Emily and a son Zachary. They divorced in 2000 after 18 years of marriage. After Laverne and Shirley, she continued working in television and film, appearing in More American Graffiti in 1979 before the show ended, and then taking on various television projects through the 1990s and 2000s. She appeared in 8 Simple Rules in 2003 and did voice work and stage productions that kept her connected to the craft she had never stopped loving. She wrote a memoir called Shirley, I Jest, published in 2015, that was warm, funny, and remarkably candid about the highs and the heartbreaks of a career that had taken her from Van Nuys to the top of the American television ratings and back again. And then the news came that nobody was ready for. Cindy Williams died on January 25, 2023 in Los Angeles, California. She was 75 years old. Her family announced she had passed after a brief illness, but did not specify the cause publicly. Her children, Emily and Zachary, confirmed her death and asked for privacy in their grief. The girl who stood on that California street in 1972, wondering if love was enough to hold 2 people together when the world was pulling them apart. She left behind 2 children, a body of work that will outlast every rerun schedule, and a laugh that once made the entire country feel a little lighter on a Tuesday night. Number 6 on the list is Candy Clark, who played Debbie Dunham, the free-spirited blonde, who climbed into Terry the Toad's borrowed car, looked at this nervous, awkward kid, trying so hard to impress her, and decided he was worth her time anyway. She was 24 years old when they filmed it, and she delivered a performance so natural, so completely unforced, that the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences nominated her for Best Supporting Actress before she had barely finished unpacking from the shoot. What most people never knew was that Candy Clark was born on June 20, 1947, in Norman, Oklahoma, and grew up in Fort Worth, Texas, in a household that had nothing to do with entertainment. There were no actors in the family, no connections to Hollywood, no roadmap pointing toward a film career. She found her way there entirely on instinct, starting as a model in New York City in the late 1960s, before the pull toward acting became impossible to ignore. She had no formal drama training in the traditional sense. What she had instead was something rarer, an absolute lack of self-consciousness in front of a camera that made every scene she appeared in feel like something accidentally caught rather than carefully constructed. George Lucas saw that quality and built Debbie Dunham around it. The Academy Award nomination for American Graffiti was not just remarkable because it came for her first major film role. It was remarkable because she was competing against some of the finest supporting performances of that entire era. She did not win, but the nomination alone announced her as a genuine talent at the highest level of the craft. What happened next revealed something important about who Candy Clark actually was. She did not chase the validation. She did not spend the next decade trying to replicate the Oscar moment or position herself for awards consideration. She simply went to work. In 1976, she appeared alongside David Bowie in The Man Who Fell to Earth, directed by Nicholas Roeg, playing Mary Lou, the warm, impulsive woman who becomes the closest thing to human connection that Bowie's alien character ever finds on Earth. The film is now considered a cult classic, and Clarke's performance in it is one of the reasons. She and Bowie had genuine on-screen chemistry that elevated every scene they shared, and Roeg trusted her completely with some of the film's most emotionally complex material. She appeared in Handle with Care in 1977, also known as Citizens Band, a Jonathan Demme film that found a devoted audience. Then came More American Graffiti in 1979, where she reprised Debbie Dunham and showed what the years had done to a character audiences had fallen in love with. Through the 1980s, she worked consistently across a range of projects that showed genuine range. Amityville 3D in 1983, Cat's Eye in 1985, the Stephen King anthology film directed by Louis Teague. At Close Range, in 1986, the Sean Penn and Christopher Walken crime drama that is still considered one of the decade's most underrated films. The Blob, in 1988, the remake of the classic science fiction horror film. Buffy the Vampire Slayer in 1992, the original film version before the television series existed. She kept working. She kept showing up. She kept delivering. What she did not do was cultivate a public persona that matched her professional output. Candy Clark remained one of the most genuinely private figures to ever receive an Academy Award nomination. No marriages are confirmed in public record. No children documented publicly. No memoir. No reality television. No carefully managed social media presence built to remind people she existed. She simply lived her life with a completeness and a privacy that felt almost radical in an industry built entirely on visibility. She has made occasional appearances at classic film conventions and retrospectives, where fans of American Graffiti and The Man Who Fell to Earth line up to meet her, with a devotion that speaks to how deeply her work landed, even when the industry was not paying close enough attention. Candy Clark is 77 years old as of 2025. The girl from Fort Worth, Texas who climbed into a stranger's car, one fictional California night and got nominated for an Oscar for it. She never needed Hollywood to define her, and Hollywood never quite knew what to do with someone that free. Number 7 on the list is Mackenzie Phillips, who played Carol Morrison, the youngest face on the set of American Graffiti, the precocious and surprisingly sharp young girl who ends up in the passenger seat of John Milner's Deuce Coupe for the longest night of her life. She was 12 years old when they filmed it. 12. And she was already holding her own against Paul Le Mat with a confidence that made her scenes some of the most memorable in the entire movie. What most people never knew was that Laura Mackenzie Phillips was born on November 10, 1959, in Alexandria, Virginia, to rock royalty. Her father was John Phillips, the primary songwriter and frontman of the Mamas and the Papas. She grew up inside the epicenter of the 1960s counterculture, surrounded by fame excess and a lack of boundaries that most children can't even imagine. She didn't attend acting classes. She didn't audition in the way others did. She was brought into the orbit of Hollywood by her father's lifestyle, and her presence in American Graffiti was a product of the world she was born into. Carol Morrison was the perfect role for her. She was wise beyond her years, because she had seen things no 12-year-old should ever have to witness. The camera caught that perfectly. After the film made her a recognizable face, she landed the role that would become her home for nearly a decade. From 1975 to 1983, she played Julie Cooper on the hit CBS sitcom One Day at a Time. She was a television star before she was old enough to drive. She was the rebellious daughter in a show that tackled real-world issues like divorce, teen pregnancy, and women's independence, and she became one of the most iconic teenage faces of the 1970s. But while America watched Julie Cooper grow up on their screens, Mackenzie Phillips was living a life that was unraveling behind the scenes. Her struggles with substance abuse began in her teens, right at the height of her fame, and they would go on to define much of her young adult life. She was fired from One Day at a Time twice during its run due to her drug addiction. Her career trajectory became a cycle of recovery and relapse that shadowed every success she achieved. But the most shocking revelation of her life did not come until 2009, when she published her memoir High on Arrival. In the book, she detailed the horrific reality of the life she lived as a child and a teenager, including an alleged decade-long sexual relationship with her own father, John Phillips. It was a revelation that stunned the entertainment world and forced a massive, painful national conversation about abuse, power, and the darkness hidden behind the curtain of the 1960s rock scene. It took immense courage to write those pages, and even more courage to live through the aftermath of sharing them. Her life has been a long, brutal road toward survival, and today she uses that experience to help others. She has become an outspoken advocate for recovery and addiction treatment, working as a counselor and educator to help those who have walked the same path she did. She married musician Jeff Sessler in 1979. She later married Shane Fontaine in 1996, and then Nicholas Happe in 2013. She has one son, Shane, from a relationship with musician Robert Field. She is 65 years old as of 2025. She is a survivor of a childhood that should have broken anyone. The little girl who sat in the passenger seat of a yellow coupe in 1972 watching the world go by has lived 1,000 lives since then, and the most important one is the one she is living now. Finally, fully, her own. Number 8 on the list is Harrison Ford, who played Bob Falfa, the cocky out-of-town drag racer who rolls into Milner's territory with a cowboy hat, a muscle car, and enough confidence to challenge the fastest driver on the strip. He was 29 years old when they filmed it. 29. And he had been trying to make Hollywood notice him for nearly a decade already. What most people never knew was that Harrison Ford was born on July 13, 1942, in Chicago, Illinois, and raised in Des Plaines, a quiet suburb north of the city, where nothing about his upbringing pointed toward the kind of global stardom that was coming. His father, Harrison Ford Sr., was an advertising executive of Irish Catholic descent. His mother, Dorothy, was of Russian Jewish heritage. He attended Ripon College in Wisconsin, where he studied philosophy and English before dropping out in his final semester to move to California and pursue acting. He signed a contract with Columbia Pictures in 1964, and then with Universal Studios shortly after. But neither studio could figure out what to do with him. He appeared in small, forgettable roles in films like Dead Heat, On a Merry-Go-Round in 1966, and A Time for Killing in 1967, and collected minor television credits without ever breaking through. Studio executives told him directly that he did not have what it took. One Columbia executive called him into his office after a small role and told him he would never make it. Ford has told that story in interviews many times. He never forgot it. Facing mounting financial pressure and a young family to support, he taught himself carpentry and began taking jobs as a self-employed contractor to pay his bills. He was good at it, precise and reliable, in exactly the way Hollywood had not yet recognized him to be. It was carpentry that changed everything. He was installing a door at the offices being used for casting sessions for a George Lucas project when Lucas saw him and offered him the role of Bob Falfa in American Graffiti. The role was small, the screen time was limited, but the presence was unmistakable. Then came the audition that rewrote the history of cinema. When Lucas began casting Star Wars in 1976, Ford was not on the initial list of candidates. He was again working as a carpenter at the facility where auditions were being held, and Lucas asked him to read lines with the actors auditioning for other roles, so those actors would have someone to play against. Ford read Han Solo. Lucas cast him immediately. Star Wars opened on May 25, 1977, and changed everything. The film earned $775 million worldwide on an original budget of $11 million and became one of the highest-grossing films in history at that point. Harrison Ford as Han Solo became one of the most iconic characters in the history of popular culture. Then came Raiders of the Lost Ark in 1981, which created Indiana Jones and gave Ford a second globally iconic character, something that had never been done before in cinema history and has almost never been repeated since. He received his only Academy Award nomination for Witness in 1985, directed by Peter Weir, in which he played a Philadelphia detective hiding in an Amish community. The nomination was long overdue, and the performance remains one of the finest of his career. He survived a near-fatal plane crash on March 5, 2015, when his vintage Ryan PT-22 Recruit aircraft lost engine power shortly after takeoff from Santa Monica Airport in California. He landed on the Penmar Golf Course. He suffered a fractured pelvis and ankle and lacerations to his head, but he survived. He was back on set within months. He has been married 3 times. To Mary Marquardt from 1964 to 1979, with whom he has 2 sons, Benjamin and Willard. To screenwriter Melissa Matheson, from 1983 to 2004, Matheson wrote the screenplay for E.T. the Extraterrestrial, with whom he has a son Malcolm and a daughter Georgia. And to actress Callista Flockhart, whom he married on June 15, 2010, and with whom he adopted a son Liam. He is currently starring as Jacob Dutton in the Paramount Plus series 1923, the Yellowstone prequel, which premiered in December 2022 and has introduced him to an entirely new generation of television audiences. Harrison Ford is 82 years old as of 2025. The carpenter who kept showing up to the jobs nobody else wanted turned out to be the most durable and beloved movie star of his entire generation. The cowboy hat fit from the very first frame. It just took the world a little while to realize it was never coming off. American Graffiti premiered on August 1, 1973. 1 film, 1 night, 8 lives that went in directions nobody could have predicted. Richard Dreyfuss, 77 years old and still fighting. Ron Howard, 71 years old and still directing. Paul Le Mat, 79 years old and living exactly as he chooses. Charles Martin Smith, 71 years old and still creating. Candy Clark, 77 years old and still free. Mackenzie Phillips, 65 years old and still standing. Harrison Ford, 82 years old and still the biggest name in the room. And Cindy Williams, gone on January 25, 2023, at 75 years old. Remembered every single day. Which one of these legends meant the most to you? Drop it in the comments right now. If this video brought something back, hit that like button, subscribe and ring that bell. There are more stories like this coming, and you do not want to miss a single one.